Howdy, guys. Attorney Walter Hnot. Now, what we're going to be doing is going through essentially something that is very important. This is the big move or the big play from President Biden by and through Commissioner Kijakazi. Now, he's probably had quite a few people advising him on things that are going to be necessary in the not too distant future, but also look good in a political sense going forward. Now, a lot of people are always wondering about some sort of fourth stimulus, some sort of boost, some sort of tax relief, etc. Well, for SSI individuals, this is one of those things that's going to act as a stimulus. So the main function of what they're doing here is getting rid of one of the calculation methods that reduces SSI benefits by around a third. That means it will increase for a portion of SSI recipients what they receive per year by about $3,895, which is incredible. That's huge. That's like a massive amount. But what you have to keep in mind throughout this process is that this is not going to affect every SSI person. This is going to not affect any retired individuals. This is going to not affect any disability individuals. So people who basically are on SSDI benefits. So let me be very specific. This was posted and submitted by the Social Security Administration on 2/15/23. This document, basically, proposed rule, this is what they're submitting that the rule be changed to, is 88 FR 9779, document citation, pages 9779-9796. This is from docket number SSA 2021-0014. Okay, now that we've got the citation out of the way, let's get to the important stuff. People were very confused by the video that I made previously about how this rule actually works. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the actual information from the SSA submission that was submitted into the federalregister.gov, okay, and go through how it works, why they did it, and what's happening. We're going to do a little bit more in-depth than we did before. Now, after we complete that, it's Thursday. Every Thursday night, I go live. And for a little less than 2 hours, I take questions and answer questions from the general public. It's people in the United States. It's people outside of the United States. A lot of them are people who are just receiving disability or SSI or retirement or about to transition to retirement. Some of the people are VA people, and they're wondering how their disability will affect those things. Totally fine. After we get this video done, we're going to shoot right over to the next video, which is going to be your chance to call in and ask questions to me, which is a cool thing because apparently people have an easier time reaching me, even if I'm not their attorney, even if they have some other disability attorney than even many of their disability attorneys. So that's a good thing. I'm answering the questions. I'm happy to do it. Let's get into this document real quick. The importance, the relevance of this document is that basically it wants to go ahead and erase and change a little some text that reduces SSI benefits for those who are not currently getting the maximum amount, the $914 in 2023, right? Because you'd get $914 in 2023. So what are they doing here? All right. They're proposing a regulation update. They're proposing the changing of a Social Security rule. The main focus of this is to ensure that the SSA has essentially those people on SSI capable of affording food, capable of being able to, speed up the process of them being found disabled, speed up the process of the SSA having to go ahead and figure out what their expenses are each month, reduce the overall amount of overpayments that they have to process, and in general, just make the system better. That's what this rule is going to do. It's going to give SSI recipients more money. It's going to go ahead and basically make it faster and easier for people to be found disabled. And then it's going to reduce the amount of overpayments. And overall, the whole thing's just going to work better. Okay? It's a very smart change. All right. I'm going to read to you specifically what it is. That way you have a basic understanding. But I want to read to you the very end of it, the summary, because I think the summary does a good job just kind of outlining the intention of what this was. Watch, and I'll have to find it real quick. Hold on. Okay, Paperwork Reduction Act, blah, blah, blah. Hold on. Let me get out of this procedural stuff. Okay, justification for change. No, we don't want that. We want the summary. That's the good stuff. That's where it basically gives you exactly what you need to know as to what they're intending to facilitate. And then we're going to go back and basically look at, okay. They are going to clarify their definition of income. So imagine they would look at who's helping you with costs of living, right? And costs of food. And if somebody in SSI land was helping an SSI recipient, they would significantly, 1/3 of it, they would take away 1/3 of your benefits, which would really screw somebody over because they couldn't afford to live with that, right? They couldn't afford to exist. So instead of it just being, wow, Joe LN, $20 donation. Thank you. That's incredible. I've been watching for a few years. I'm on SSD and a vet at 100%. I'm dying, so my experience is different than most. Took 5 years to get approved. Now I have 6 months. That's so tough. That's very, very, very tough. Wow. If you can call in a little bit later to tell your story because people need to hear about that. Your story is not completely uncommon, but the situation you're in is going to become more common because the amount of time it takes to be found disabled is getting stretched and stretched and stretched out, which means that people are dying without getting benefits, or they'll get benefits and then be passing away not that long thereafter. But thank you for the $20 donation. That's absolutely incredible. I really, really appreciate that. So basically, the SSA is saying, look, everybody, and they're saying this without Congress doing anything yet. This is like an SSA, they've got the spear, they're throwing the spear, they're doing the thing. This is their thing. Obviously, Congress, by and through the White House, is aware of what's going on. The promotion of it is being pushed forward, and I'm sure there's a political background to it. But let me explain exactly what they're doing here. I'm reading right from it. When we remove food from the calculation of ISM, right? That's that 1/3 reduction rule where they remove 1/3 of your benefits. We would make that clear in our general definition of income. This change would ensure consistency among our regulations. Separate from the removal of food from separate from the removal of food from the calculations of ISM, we would use this opportunity to clarify that income may be received constructively. Constructive receipt of income is part of our current policy, and this change would make the definition of income clear. Okay, so once, the SSA hasn't always been great at explaining things on their definition charts, but let me summarize. They're changing how we calculate whether or not they're going to take away 1/3 of your SSI benefits per month. And they're taking out, in large part, food from being a consideration. All right, so let me give you some examples of how this would work. That way you understand. I'm going to give you a general example, and then I'm going to give you examples specifically from this document so that you have a better understanding as to how it works. Okay, let's say, and I just pulled up the examples here. Let's say that an individual, right, is receiving assistance from somebody else. Okay, so let's just make up a name, a cool name. For some reason, Jenny is coming to mind, but that's not a particularly cool name. That's a pretty common name. Let's just use Jenny. Okay, Jenny lives somewhere else, right? She has some way to afford this place. It's super cheap, etc. But somebody else, her mom or her grandma, it doesn't matter, somebody she's related to, gives her extra money each month for food, brings over the food that she is going to use, consistently eat, consistently consume. She's being assisted by somebody because they're bringing her this food. What the SSA is saying here is that if that person brings this SSI person money for food, stuff like that, then they need to do an analysis. But if they change the rule, food, is it in itself not going to be considered, okay, as part of the calculations that remove 1/3 of your benefits? That's the whole idea here. The whole idea here is basically people can feed SSI recipients without it reducing 1/3 of their benefits. Okay, let's go through some of these examples real quick. These are from the proposal changes and specifically from the examples that were submitted to the Federal Register. Okay, example: Stan lives in an apartment with a friend, and Stan has rental liability, which means Stan is liable to a landlord for rent. Currently, his household operating expenses are $1,400 monthly, $1,000 rent and utilities, and $400 for food. So $1,400 total, $1,000 for rent, $400 for food. Stan's prorated share of the household operating expenses is $700, right? So his what he has to pay is the $700, okay? So remember that household operating expenses $1,400. You split it in half. He's paying $700. Cool. Stan contributes $500 specifically for rent, right? So if the rent is $1,000, we split it. He's paying 500 of it, right? He does not contribute to the household's food expenses, though. He consumes the household's food. Oh, see, that's the tricky part. Let me read that part again because that's important. He does not contribute to the household's food expenses, okay, though he consumes the household's food. In this example, during an interview with our technician at the SSA, an SSA person, the technician informed Stan that they would apply the maximum value under the PMV rule and asked Stan if he intended to rebut the maximum value. So, put in English, what that means is the SSA rep that's talking with our good friend Stan is about to not screw over Stan financially, but whatever's right below that is what's happening here. Stan is likely about to lose 1/3 of his benefits because he basically is not having to pay into the food costs associated with his share of that household. Okay. So what that means is that under this scenario, the interviewing technician, which they usually don't do this, by the way, they're supposed to do this, and I'm glad that they put it in here, but they don't, in practical application, they don't usually do this. And I'll read to you the sentence again and tell you the part that they don't usually do. In this example, during an interview with our technician, the SSA rep, the technician informed Stan that they would apply the maximum value under the PMV rule, right? They never call it that. They never say it's that. They most of the time don't even tell the claimant that this is applying, that this is happening. And the technician asked Stan if he intended to rebut the maximum value. Now, look, if you don't know anything about Social Security law or how the rules work or whatever, and I said this following statement to you, okay, and many of you chime in, when you had this meeting for SSI, did any of them say to you, during an interview with your technician, did the technician say, did they inform you that they would apply the maximum value under the PMV rule and ask if you intended to rebut the maximum value? No, they never do that. Well, sometimes they might. I mean, I'm sure now that this has come out, they're working on some scripts for these people, to follow more closely. But the bottom line is this. They almost never come out and say, do you intend to rebut this rule that's going to reduce your benefits by 1/3 because you are not paying your fair share into the operating expenses of the food for where you live? They just don't do that. They just don't do that. Stan rebutted. He rebutted because he knew what to do. His rebuttal was submitted. And, you got to keep in mind, like, put it another way. Stan said, hell no. You can't reduce my benefits by 1/3. I will create and provide the evidence needed. In other words, Stan rebutted. The amount of shelter ISM that he receives, indicating it is less than the maximum value. Under the current rule, we would apply the PMV, take away 1/3 of his benefits, and reduce Stan's monthly SSI benefits by $200. The difference between his prorated share and his contributions. Oh, okay. In this instance, they're just reducing his benefits a little bit, not the maximum amount. Under the proposed rule, right, we would exclude food expenses, bringing the total household operating expenses to $1,000, right? Because remember, it was $1,000 for rent, $400 for food of the $1,400 operating expenses of that household. This would reduce Stan's prorated share to $500. If he still contributed $500 monthly to his household operating expenses, he would meet his prorated share and we would no longer reduce his benefits because of ISM. Cool. So in this instance, if they took away the food issue, the thing where they calculate the food into it, they wouldn't take away, all of it because the food wouldn't count anymore. They'd be looking at just basically, paying in the expenses of his rent and things like that, and how it would reduce that overall. Example number 2. Jane lives in an apartment with her sister. Okay, so Jane and her sister. Jane has rental liability. And you notice how they keep saying rental liability? That's like de facto proof that they're living at a spot. Like, that's on paper. You paid for rental liability to be able to live there, which means they know you're on some sort of lease somewhere, some sort of whatever to pay rent. Okay. This is their de facto. We know where you live. This is where you live. This is why you took out insurance. Okay. Currently, their household operating expenses are $1,200 monthly. 900 rent and utilities, and 300 food. So remember, 900 rent, 300 food, the rent and utilities 900, 1,200 total. Jane's pro rata share of the household operating expenses is 600. So once again, it's a perfect split. So halvesy right down the line. So Jane has to pay half. Her sister has to pay half. I don't think they give the sister a name, so we're just going to call her sister, or, Clarice or Jenny or whatever. Come up with a name. Kelly. Something better than those. This is just so classic, and they're over. I mean, I almost say, you got like, all right. So anyway, we got Jane and the sister. Jane contributes $500 currently, which is less, just pointing it out, than half of the 1,200 monthly total operating. And we know that her operating expenses are 600. So she's only paying 500. So Jane is a sister that's not paying as much as the other sister. Okay. We all got a sibling. We all know where the sibling has done that. Currently, we would apply the PMV rule and reduce Jane's monthly SSI benefits by 100, right? Because she's not paying in her full 600. Somebody else is covering her butt for $100 because she's supposed to essentially cover 600. She's only paying 500, so they're reducing her benefits by 100. Okay. All right. So currently, we would apply the PMV rule and reduce Jane's monthly SSI benefits by 100. The difference between her prorated share and her actual contribution. Put another way, what they're saying is it was 1,200 total. They're supposed to split it. That's 600 apiece for both sisters. 500 is what our person, Jane, our SSI recipient, receives. And as a result of that, she's not paying her full 600. The difference between 500 what she pays and the 600 what she's supposed to pay is $100. They reduce her benefits by $100. Under the proposed rule, we would exclude food expenses. Okay, bringing the total household operating expenses to $900, right? Because remember, it was 300 food, $900 for rent. Okay, that totals 1,200, and they were supposed to split it 600, 600 each. So under the proposed rule, we would exclude the food expenses, the $300 of the 1,200, bringing the total household operating expenses to 900. Okay, so now we're only worried about the rent. Rent was 900 / utilities, 300 food. We don't care about the 300 food anymore. It's not part of our calculation. This would reduce Jane's pro rata share to $450 because now we're not calculating the food in there. So we've got basically our $900, right? Jane and her sister. We split it in half. That's $450, that's due. Okay. If she still contributes, which she is, her $500 monthly to her household operating expenses, we would no longer reduce her benefits because of ISM, because she is paying more than her fair share once they take the food out of the calculations. Everybody cool? Let me just see if everybody's cool. Joseph Newcomb said they should get rid of the penalties and let people have their max benefits married and single. Yeah, they should. It was on the Biden pre-White House website. Let's see. Billy said, so many are faking fraudsters. Bess Smith said, Joseph Newcomb. Kylie Ray, I'm really good at securing food from pantries. Like the people I live with rarely go to the grocery store, but when they do, they buy expensive things like steak, salmon, crab legs, etc. Well, sounds like they eat better than me. All right, so now here's the deal. I'm going to read to you the next paragraph now that I've kind of explained how this works, how they're cutting out the whole food expenses thing. We expect that some other applicants or recipients, those who do not contribute their full pro rata share even after food expenses would be omitted, may experience a smaller benefit reduction under the proposed policy. This could occur if a higher proportion of applicants or recipients' contribution is allotted towards shelter expenses, or if applicants or recipients contribute to their household operating expenses generally, and they continue to contribute the same amount toward their household operating expenses even after, as proposed, food is no longer included in the household operating expenses. So let me put that in English. What they're saying is the math for this fixing the problem in general and wiping out the reduction of benefits might not always work as best as it could. If, for example, people notate or tell an SSA rep that their food expenses are really low, and their, basically their rental, their utility expenses are really high, then what will happen is they won't get the benefit here as much. So when the SSA asks you and you're on SSI benefits, what are your rent and utilities and what are your food expenses? Your food expenses should be high, because if they're high and they're not part of the calculation, then you'll get the maximum benefit here. So remember, rent and utilities, low. Food expenses, high. And I know what you're going to say. Well, your rent is always this and blah, 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 and so on and so forth. I get that. But that doesn't mean that your food can't be high. Doesn't mean that what you buy to be able to eat because of your impairments can't be high. So like the person who stated in here, hey, I'm really good at going to food pantries and getting food and not having to buy groceries. This rule change is not going to help those people that much because they don't spend that much on food because they're using food pantries. Example, Mark owns his home. They got to get different names. It's always like John, Kelly. They got to get like some cool names in here. Mark owns his home and his parents live with him. Not that anything's wrong with Mark. They could have used Walter. Why couldn't they use Walter? It's like an old German name. I got stuck with it. I'm the third. They could have used it. All right, here we go. Mark owns his home and his parents live with him. Okay, so Mark owns his home. Wow. William Randall. Thank you for the $20 donation. I really, really appreciate it. That's awesome. And I love the little picture there with the little heart and the little dude with the backwards hat. That's super cool. Thank you. I like that. Detroit, Walt, Dandelions or Waldo. That's so, yeah, but William, thank you. I really appreciate it. That's awesome. So, Mark owns his home and his parents, they live with him. Okay. Currently, the household operating expenses are $2,050 monthly. Okay. So overall cost to do this whole live in there household expenses, $2,000 and $2,050, right? Okay. No change. So $2,050 monthly, $1,600 for mortgage and utilities, and $450 for food. Okay, so remember, in your brain, split it up. $1,600 mortgage, utilities, $450 food. Okay, remember, with this rule change, the $450 isn't going to count. Okay, Mark's prorated share of the household operating expenses would be $683.33. Again, Mark's prorated share of household operating expenses would be $683.33. So what they did was they looked at this, right? So his parents live with him. So we'll assume that there's two parents. There could be more. We live in that modern, world. It could be more. You could have 5 or 6 parents. But anyways, Mark, right, lives here. His parents live here. Anyways, Mark pays towards that $2,050 monthly, $683.33. And now they're going to tell us how they split that up, the $683. Mark contributes $500 currently. So he's not paying the full $683.33. Okay. So we know that we might have to look at this and see, okay, well, what's going towards the mortgage and the utilities and what's going towards the food. Currently, we would apply the PMV rule and reduce Mark's SSI benefits by $183.33. So let me explain that. He's only paying in $500, but his overall expense, to live there is $683.33. This means that he is not paying his way, and they're reducing his benefits based off of, the amount that he is not paying his way. Okay. So they reduce his benefits by $183.33, which is the difference between what it costs for him to live there and essentially what he's actually paying. Now, under the proposed rule, so if they were to change this rule, okay, we would exclude food expenses, bringing the total household operating expenses down to $1,600. So instead of considering, right, what he pays in towards that $2,050 total, which is $683.33, we would only look at the total cost of the mortgage and the utilities, but we would ignore the food. The food is worth $450. The $1,600 is the mortgage and utilities. Okay. Under the proposed rule, we would exclude food expenses, bringing the total household operating expenses down to $1,600, right? That's the mortgage and utilities, $1,600. This would reduce Mark's pro rata share to $533.33, okay? Because they get rid of the portion that goes to Mark, basically of what he would have to pay for the food. If he still contributed $500 monthly to his household operating expenses, he would reduce his benefits by only $33.33 for the ISM, the in-kind support and maintenance. Okay. Though, and I'll just read straight from here what they're saying. Though we propose to eliminate food expenses from our ISM calculations, we would still consider food expenses for a narrow purpose to determine whether to use the VTR rule or the PMV rule. All right. So, I'm not going to read the whole thing on what these rules are, but just know the PMV rule is the presumed maximum value, right? So I'll read you the intro. The PMV rule, the presumed maximum value, applies when an applicant or recipient receives ISM, in-kind support and maintenance, where they're trying to reduce their benefits. But the VTR rule does not apply, okay? VTR rule is the value of the 1/3 reduction. The VTR rule applies when an applicant or recipient lives throughout a month in another person's household and receives both food and shelter from others living in that household. Put another way, the VTR is the calculation of how much they cost to live there versus what they're actually paying. Okay. All right, cool. Now, though we propose to eliminate food expenses from our ISM calculations, the 1/3 reduction rule calculations, we will still consider food expenses for narrow purpose to determine whether to use the VTR rule or the PMV rule in certain circumstances. Food expenses would not be included in the actual calculation. We would continue to ask applicants and recipients certain questions about food, and they gotta, because they gotta know what the food costs to know what basically the other figures are going to be, because it's like a major thing. When you ask people like, well, how much are your monthly expenses? If utilities, rent or mortgage, and food. And then maybe you could throw in there like, gas for your car, blah, 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 whatever. Okay. But, food is a major category. So they have to still figure it out what the calculation is for it. They got to still, it's not that they're just going to be like, well, we don't care what you're doing with food. They still have to use it to figure out the calculation for it. All right, so we would continue to ask applicants and recipients certain questions about food, which it's going to be calculation stuff. These questions are the following. Number 1, do you buy food separately from the household? Your answer should be, yes, you do. Yes, you do. Your answer better be yes, you do. Better be. All right, next one. Number 2, do you eat all your meals out? Your answer should be, no, I don't. No, I do not. I surely do not. Once again, do you buy your food separately from the other household members? Yes, you do. Yes, you do. Number 2, do you eat all of your meals out? No, you do not. You do not. No, you do not. Number 3, do you receive supplemental nutritional assistance program, SNAP, that's your food stamps? If applicant or recipient answers yes to any of these questions, even if the applicant or recipient lives in another person's household, we would evaluate their ISM using the PMV rule to calculate ISM, and we propose to add this to our regulation. All right. Then it goes into the proposed regulation of how they figure out basically how they're going to reduce benefits. It's a schematic. Now, we're not going to spend a lot of time on schematic today because I'm going to break down the schematic in another video because it's just going to make this video too long and then we'll never get to the questions that people want to call in and ask about on Thursday night. But to simplify things, yay, Shirley! Thank you for the $2.99 donation. Love the little thumbs up. Super cool. Very cool. Very cool. Thank you. Thank you. So basically, here's what you need to know. When it comes to this, you could potentially reduce the 1/3 reduction rule to get the maximum amount of SSI benefits. And if you were to do that, you would get $3,895.92 more per year. This has been submitted to the Federal Register. They've been working on this. They have a schematic for how it applies. It's good. It's really good. They did a good job with this. Like the writers that went into this and outlined it all, they did a good job. They did a really good job. Now, some of you are going to be asking me essentially, what's the max per month that your benefits could potentially increase by? And I can answer that pretty quickly. It's basically $324.66. If you play your cards right and you answer things correctly when it comes to in-kind support and maintenance or the 1/3 reduction rule, you're looking at essentially $324.66 more per month for those who have a fully reduced 1/3 reduction rule where they take away the maximum, the full 1/3 of your benefits. And remember, there's also the $20 rule in there. They tacked on as well. That's why it's not just 304.66, but if you get hit with the maximum where they take away the max from your benefits, the full 1/3 plus the $20, then basically you get to gain potentially $324.66 per month. Okay. We will go through that in more detail in another video, but I just wanted to explain what the rule is here. We did another video where we went through the details as to why this rule is actually whoops, sorry. And as a result of that, what's happening here is, and I think this is brilliant. I think, frankly, this is a political system that's being used to win a potential presidential run for President Biden. So what President Biden is doing here, by and through Commissioner Kijikazi with the SSA, is that President Biden is looking at the programs to find little ways that he can say that he increased benefits for SSI beneficiaries, SSDI beneficiaries, retirement beneficiaries, disabled adult child beneficiaries, widows beneficiaries, and survivor benefit beneficiaries. So what he's doing is he's looking up small ways to slightly increase some people in those programs, right? There's only about 9% of SSI people who tap into this, and then a smaller percent that are hit by the full 1/3 reduction rule amount. As a result of that, he's picking a small group of people and increasing their benefits. Now, when you do this and you hit each category of entitlement recipients, you're setting yourself up for a presidential win. That's what he's doing. That's the political game that's happening. Whether you love President Biden or hate President Biden, that's not my shindig. I don't care. You can vote whichever way you want. But the point is, when it comes to this stuff, that's how he's doing this. And it's smart. It's very smart. He's finding a cheap way to improve things a little bit so that it makes it seem like he's got some strong bullet points. Because think about it. If you bullet point this, right? If you flat out bullet point it, like you have to create a thumbnail for a video just like I did, what this comes out to is you get to say, the SSA rules have been changed, right? But they haven't yet. They're still technically submitted to the Federal Register as a proposal. But let's say in the future, let's say it's 2023 at the end of the year, 2024, whatever. He gets to say, while he's standing on the podium overlooking people, some of which that are standing before him are supplemental security income recipients. Although, to be fair, a lot of SSI people can't afford to travel, which that's a thing. But bottom line is this. He gets to say, I increased SSI benefits for some SSI recipients up almost $4,000 more per year. I mean, that's the bullet point that he gets to promote as a potential second-term presidential figure, which is smart. I think, and as we talked about in another video, Trump is not doing as well when it comes to what he's going to do or how he's going to address what happens with Social Security benefits, whether it's retirement, disability, etc. So I expect things to heat up with Social Security benefits over the next year and get red hot, saucy, and crazy, basically about 6 months before the November election details occur. So this channel will, of course, always report on what's going on. I'll give you my opinion. I think it's important that you guys get to hear somebody who's in the industry giving you information about the industry, about how it works, what's going on. I know that sometimes when I address something, I don't get it perfect the first time when I'm trying to explain it, because sometimes it's tough to explain it in simple terms. And then I go back and make another video and try and get it a little bit better. The same thing happened with grid outs. I made that huge, giant video where I outlined exactly how attorneys look at it, exactly how the judges look at it. And then a lot of people came back, and I thought it was brilliant. I thought it was like, this is it. This is the video. And then I go back and look at it. I'm just like, well, a lot of people didn't get it. So, but then there's another thing too. You have to understand, you got to understand, when I make these videos, I'm not going to hit a home run every time when I try to explain really complex things. Like sometimes the ball's going to hit the bat and it's going to end up way over there and in somebody's, lemonade. It's just not, you know what I mean? I'm not going to hit a home run every time when I do a video trying to explain a complex thing. So, but, look at that. Lay Troit said, I learned a lot from that grid video. Thank you. I appreciate that, because I had some people email me like, what the bleep was that video about? So I appreciate that. That's awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and now prep the next video, which is where I go live and people get to call in and ask me whatever questions they want. I like to think of it as your opportunity to basically ask me questions that you can't ask your advocates or your attorneys, or you're not representing, you just don't know, or like, the SSA is changing this. How's that going to affect me? I like to think of it that way. So anyways, guys, I'll be back in about 5 minutes, and then I've got the phone right here. So what we'll do is, you know how this works. People call in. They call the 407-279-1754 phone number. We get this puppy ready to go. We strap the phone in, and we begin taking calls. Now, please remember, when you do that stuff, when you call in, I'm going to give you the intro. Hi, this is Attorney Walter Hnot, Disability Resolution PA. Please remember to use a fake name throughout this process. Would you like me to answer a specific question, or would you like me to run hearing questions with you? That's the way I always open with it. Remember to use a fake name. I'll catch you a little bit later. 5 minutes. We'll be back and we'll go from there. Thanks so much, guys. Bye-bye, guys. Bye-bye.